This is the Requiem Metal Podcast, episode 63, Judas Priest, part 2. You just heard Exciter on the Requiem Metal Podcast. I'm Mark.
And I'm Jason. And you heard a live version of Exciter from the aforementioned Unleashed in the East. If you listened a couple weeks ago, we had Judas Priest Part 1, and we kind of explored their early years, their first 3 records, and really the first 2 records that most Priest fans kind of take seriously, which is Sad Wings and Sin After Sin. But we also did talk a little bit about Unleashed in the East, but it was recorded live in Japan. And
partially.
Well, yeah. At least everything but Rob Halford was. They went back in and redubbed the vocals and stuff, and it's really kind of a, if you wanted to think of it as a 70s greatest hits of Judas Priest, really kind of the first kind of great era, and it's just got a really nice sound. The live brings I think the energy that Judas Priest is sort of known for across really well, and in particular in a kind of faster, in your face kind of tune like Exciter. It's a good way to kick off a show. I think that's the opening tune of the record too, isn't it? To Unleashed.
Yeah,
that's what they open the whole record with, and then of course they open the record that we're going to be talking about here in a moment, which is Stained Class with Exciter as well. So
it's funny, it's almost got the same cover as the Made in Japan.
Yeah, kind of does.
With the cheesy stage lights and everybody covered in smoke. But no, it's actually one of the few live records I think are actually worth a crap, because for the most part I don't think live records really do anybody any justice.
Yeah, I mean, Iron Maiden, it's probably
like Rock in Rio and Live After Death, stuff like that. But I think it's a rare occurrence where a live record actually surpasses a studio one, and Unleashed totally does that for me.
And I think Judas Priest's sound lends itself really nicely to a live record, because they're not muddied in technicality, but there's enough like flair that kind of keeps their sound really interesting. Decade of Aggression from Slayer is one of my favorite live records of all time, as well as Live Undead, and I think that's because of the simplicity of the Slayer sound in a way, whereas like maybe like Megadeth or Metallica or something like that has more kind of intricate, complex solos kind of happening. They sort of sacrifice energy sometimes for technicality, whereas like Slayer and Judas Priest are about like kind of like the emotional punch of their music in a way. Same with Maiden to some extent, although Maiden it seems to bridge technicality, emotion, like they're kind of like the crux of all,
they got it all right.
all metal. And that's probably why Maiden is probably the most consistently great metal band in the history of heavy metal. But anyways, going back to Unleashed in the East, they put this record out in 80. I think it was recorded in 1979, but when did the record actually come out? I'm trying to remember. So
my notes are saying 79.
79? Okay, that makes sense. I know it was recorded then, I just didn't know if it was released a little bit later. And that was on the Hellbent for Leather tour that they put a lot of that stuff together. But so we wanted to kind of start off with a little bit of energy and a little bit of punch, and in particular Exciter. From Stained Class, one of the things that you'll notice with that tune compared to say like the Sin After Sin, Sad Wings of Destiny stuff that we did a couple shows back is the speed at which and the velocity of the music. It's not like Tyrant or even like Distant Aggressor where there's like it's consciously heavy and punchy. This to me is just like rev your engines, go.
Speed metal.
Yeah,
begins.
It's really kind of the birth of the sort of thrash speed metal. Distant Aggressor, you mentioned in the last show, was sort of the influence of that, but to me, Priest really, they were like consciously trying to write like a speed metal song with this. It didn't just like accidentally happen, because you mentioned that like Distant Aggressor is almost like an anomaly on Sin After Sin. In a weird
totally,
way. Whereas this fits with the theme of Stained Class. And I would go so far as to say that Stained Class is like the first really consciously organized metal image, metal record, metal sound, metal song titles. This is when Priest puts on their leather for the first time. So they're putting the style, the image, the album cover. Because you mentioned that Sin After Sin kind of has like a Led Zeppelin feel to like the cover.
House of the Holy cover or something,
And Sad Wings of Destiny has more like a Sabbath cover. And not to take any thing away from like say Sabbath, because Sabbath was very much heavy metal, but Judas Priest is sort of bringing like all of the different elements that go into heavy metal, the imagery, the lyrics, the song titles, the
what we know as heavy metal now.
Exactly. And it's all, to me, comes together for the very first time into a conscious kind of vision on Stained Class in a sort of way, you know, and to varying levels of success. You know, you said that Stained Class sounds like a more complete piece of work, but yet the recording of it doesn't have the warmth of, say, the early stuff that Priest had, or the
transition
that the later Priest stuff has. So, you know, they're moving in that transition. I think in terms of songwriting, I don't think you're going to get a more consistent record, probably. You know, every there's not really a clunker on this record, whereas, like, there's a clunker on almost every other Priest record, you know.
Yeah, or a couple.
Yeah, or a couple that kind of make you cringe a little bit. But yeah, definitely a template with the aggressive vocals, the aggressive flurries of stuff. And by the time Stained Class came out in early 1978, they've brought in yet another drummer, Les Binks, and he'll be the drummer on.
He'll stick around for 2 records at least.
Yeah, this and Help. So he's actually 3 technically, because he plays on Unleashed.
Yeah.
So that's a pretty good run for a Judas Priest drummer.
Yeah, outside of Scott Travis, it's the longest drummer.
Dave Holland too. Dave Holland did all those 80s records. He did British Steel all the way up to Ram It Down. So, Judas Priest, you and your album.
Judas Priest.
You know, the funny thing too that I forgot to mention about Exciter, it's also one of the first fictional characters that we get to follow along.
Yeah, this is something. Is this something you discovered yourself, or is this poking around a lot?
I kind of poked around, and people start making reference to it, and they start talking about, well, like Painkiller's a character. Yeah. You know, there's the Hellions a character, Exciter's a character, and it's kind of this like cheesy thing.
The Sinner.
I'm sure the Jugulator's probably a character.
Oh, totally.
Too.
Jugulator's the dude on the cover.
Yeah, exactly. So they have this, like, you know, fantasy element that they're putting in. Not to say that Priest couldn't write, like, you know, conscious songs, but you know, they definitely were in the fantasy realm. You know, Black Sabbath was.
But they weren't. Yeah, they were. But they were more rooted in like Frank Frazetta fantasy, as opposed to like Iron Maiden was totally over the top fantasy.
Yeah, with like the comic book kind of stuff. I mean, and historical characters.
Yeah, Stranger in a Strange Land, When Worlds Collide. Everything's based on some kind of like movie. The Prisoner.
Yep, exactly. You know, so Priest's characters are more like these like dystopian, like dirty kind of Blade Runner kind of world characters in a way. You know, like Stained Class, the title track from this record, is very much about kind of like a dystopian society or Orwellian kind of things. It's not very complex. You know, they don't get into the ins and outs of it. But and that's the other thing we should say about Judas Priest, and I think it really starts to come to light, especially on the trio of records that we're mainly going to be focusing on, which is Stained Class, Hellbent for Leather, and British Steel. There's much more of a working class element that goes into Judas Priest as opposed to, say, Iron Maiden, whereas like Iron Maiden to me has a little bit more intellectualism kind of into it.
I would agree with that.
You know, Priest kind of came out of more of a working class kind of, I think, area, just being from Birmingham, and then I think also they start to bring in that kind of working class hard rock elements like the AC/DC
Def Leppard-ish kind of
sound, you know. Whereas to me, Iron Maiden gets more and more complex through the 80s. Priest kind of is almost like caught sometimes. They want to do like some of the technical like soloing kind of stuff that you hear like in the late 80s with Painkiller. But then they're also like doing like Point of Entry, and you know,
they're slowing it down to almost like losing everything they had.
Yeah.
Like almost doing like what Metallica did, you know, with Load and Reload, like strip everything away, but not in a good way. It didn't
work to varying levels, you know, for Priest. You know, there's some experiments that they do that work really well. Like I think, and we'll talk more about this later, but the change that they do on Hellbent for Leather, where they simplify and kind of streamline things a little bit, that was successful.
I mean, Hellbent for Leather, you could almost put that up against the Black album from Metallica.
Yeah,
it's that kind of like simplification and gestation of what they had.
But it's still got enough kind of going on, enough solos, enough kind of punch. Whereas like a record that we'll end up skipping, which is Point of Entry, just it lacks any. It's like too subtle, too like hard rock, too simple.
It's really radio,
and and Priest, that's really the definition of Judas Priest in the 80s, in a sense, is this kind of like fine balance between commerciality and kind of keeping their roots alive. And I think that's one of the things you'll hear on this show that they're kind of struggling with, especially the end of the show, I'd say. In the Stained Class is still very consistent, and same with Hellbent. But Hellbent for Leather, Stained Class, this is the first like metal cover. You know, it's got like well, maybe the Exciter. I don't know who it is. Some sort of metal-like character.
It looks like a vacuum metal head with like a, I don't know if it's a pole through it.
Yeah, it looks like a pole of some sort. It looks like the T-1000 almost, like kind of a Terminator, like gelatinous kind of molten dude. So
actually, it reminds me of those crappy. Do you ever see those glass head banks?
Okay, yeah.
Those cheap ass things you see at the dime store or whatever.
But it definitely it's evocative. It's kind of a weird cover. And I remember I got this on vinyl when I was in high school, and that's where we first checked it out. And then I think eventually I picked it up on cassette tape, and we would listen to Exciter before we'd play hockey out at Grindcore Coon's farm in the wintertime and stuff. And I think we kind of laughed at it. And that's one of the things that's like interesting about Judas Priest, and you kind of talked about it last episode. This is a hard band for me to take seriously at first because there is so much kind of cliche to some of their sing-alongs and some of their song titles, and
but really they were the ones that started the cliche,
exactly,
the stereotypes.
But I think it's hard historically coming in like the early 90s when all you know of Priest is Jugulator and Rob Halford's in Fight, so it was a little bit of a struggle to be able to go back and appreciate Priest, or to take them kind of right.
Supposedly, from all the research I've been doing for the show and just general interest in the band, that solo record that Halford did in 2000 is supposed to be fantastic.
Really?
Yeah, it's got like unbelievable reviews. The one with just him on the motorcycle on the cover.
Yeah, I do remember that coming out.
It's just called like Halford or something.
I think I ignored it at the time because I just assumed it was going to be bad.
Yeah, I wasn't a big fan of Fight, nor of Two or Voyeur or whatever the other crap he was doing.
Fight I didn't mind actually, but that was also because we were in like eighth and ninth grade
for that.
They had like a couple singles. Into the Pit was pretty cool too. And
that's when he was doing like almost some guttural vocals there too.
Yeah. What's the Crazy? I'm Just a Little Crazy. Was like their big. It's all right. Yeah.
It didn't have the guitar flair that originally I would go to Priest for.
Well, and you were listening to Finnish and Swedish metal at the time.
Yeah.
I mean, Fight didn't serve any purpose for you guys, where you were at. We were watching a lot of Headbangers Ball. So
I think I appreciate it more going back and exploring it, because that was the same way with Maiden. I listened to them a little bit in the 80s, or was kind of familiar with them, but then it wasn't until the late 80s, early 90s that I really started getting into them. And then when those Castle reissues came out, like 93 or 4 or something.
Was that when you picked up most of those?
Yeah, I had like tapes and records of the other ones before, because it was always easy to find an Iron Maiden record someplace. Because
back in the day,
God, they were everywhere.
Now, not so much.
No, because all the DJs pick them up.
Yeah,
or stupid kids, all the kids.
you trendy kids and your twin leads and stuff. Yeah, so it is weird. Priest, I kind of accumulated throughout the years. I had Stained Class first, and then Sin After Sin, and then just kind of slowly picked up a couple of records here and there. But it wasn't really until the last, I think 3 or 4 years that I started to fill in a lot of the gaps in my collection.
Yeah, I've had them all MP3'd for quite a while now, but finally pick up the real deal.
Trying to get the gems, and accumulate it all. But I think because Stained Class is my first one, that's the one that kind of warms my heart in a weird way. It's the one I kind of keep going back to. The trio of tunes that we're going to play off of Stained Class here, we got Saints in Hell coming up, then the title track, and then we'll close with Beyond the Realms of Death, and we'll talk about Beyond the Realms of Death when we come back. But it's cool. Saints in Hell, you and I both picked up on it when we were listening to it today. Very stoner rock kind of Caius vibe going on to
that riff,
to elements of the riff and stuff. Definitely Josh Homme or Home, however. Remember we got Hame. Yeah, I remember we had that pronunciation war that when we did the Caius show. But so it's that part's there, and there's a cool little breakdown about 3 minutes into the song. Very self-consciously metal, going back, to me, they conceived of this as a metal record for the first time. And then some darker lyrics, as I said, the dystopian themes on Stained Class, and then really the bow to the mightiness of Beyond the Realms of Death, kind of the stairway to heaven of early heavy metal in a weird way. So, but any thoughts on Stained Class for you?
Well, it's one of the records that I'm not hugely familiar with front to back. It's more of a single kind of record, but as I said last pre-show that we talked, the production's kind of what got me a little bit on it. Musically, they're really firing on all cylinders, but they still haven't found a producer that can capture that quite as, I guess, extreme as I want to hear it.
Yeah. And it's weird because I think one of the things that's interesting about doing this Judas Priest show is some of the records that Mark's more familiar with are the ones I'm less familiar with, and vice versa. You know, so like it kind of weirdly works out. We like kind of cover each other in different areas, you know. So because there are certain records I probably would have ignored otherwise, you know, had it not been for you.
Well, even like, with this
promote, you know, this is actually a cool song. And
yeah, with doing the you know, just putting together this list here, going back and listening to Ram It Down, like, man, actually the title track's pretty sweet.
Not bad, not bad. Yeah, I mean, there's certain songs where at first, like, I'd be like, I don't, because I guess just looking at the cover as a kid, I just thought, this isn't a good Judas Priest record. But there's parts of it that
probably their least dynamic cut. Well, it's almost as bad as the Jugulator cover.
Yeah, or the Turbo cover. Yeah.
Turbo cover's got some class to it.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, too bad the song doesn't. So, but anyway, so enjoy a trio of Stained Class tunes with Saints of Hell, Stained Class, and Beyond the Realms of Death.
Oh, he turned his back on me. couldn't understand. They washed and dressed him, let him a hand. Yeah, I've left the world behind. I am sitting down in my mind. I'm feeling sweet with my own mind. This is my life, this is my life. I'll decide like you. Withdrawn, it's sit there, staring into space. No sign of life. What flicker on his face until one day he smiled. It seemed as though with pride the wind kissed him goodbye. And then he died. Yeah, I left the world behind. I am safe now in my mind. Free to speak with my own kind. This is my life, this is my life. I decide that you keep the world with all its sin. It's not meant for living. Yeah, I will start again. It can take forever, 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 but I shall win. How many like him? Are there still who to us all seem to have lost the will? They lie in thousands, blank and lost. Is now their worth this bitter cause? Yeah, I left the world behind. I am safe now in my mind. Free to speak with my own kind. This is my life, my life. I'll decide that you keep the world with all
That was Beyond the Realms of Death, preceded by Stained Class and Open Things Up with Saints in Hell. And there's not, we could talk about Beyond the Realms of Death, but I think the song really just kind of speaks for itself. It has every kind of great epic metal cliche in it. It's like Hallowed Be Thy Name, or
it's like one of their quintessential
Fade to Black
early songs,
or,
I think.
Welcome Home Sanitarium. I mean, it's just a large build. It's quiet, it's dark lyrics. I think it's kind of about suicide. If I do, someone who
don't have the lyrics.
Someone who doesn't want to kind of go on. You've had enough. You're kind of like giving up on life. So it's kind of those anathema themes that we explored 3 or 4 weeks ago. Some of that kind of stuff.
Or it could all be veiled. Homosexual problems that Halford has
had. He had enough. He couldn't take any more. He'd found a place in his mind and slammed the door. No matter how they tried, they couldn't understand. They washed and dressed him, fed him by hand. Yeah, I've left the world behind. I'm safe here in my mind, free to speak. Yeah, could be veiled.
I mean, almost look at any Judas Priest lyrics, and there's 2 ways to read the thing. And
sure,
I mean, as everybody knows that Rob Halford has come out as a homosexual, and has actually been kind of heralded by the gay community, and has nobody really had any kind of backlash. Like,
no,
who cares? The guy's an unbelievable vocalist. He's still the metal god.
You can't touch Rob Halford. You know what I mean? And that's what it takes sometimes, is like the kind of the perfect person to be like a spokesperson for a civil rights movement. Somebody that deflects stones. There's nothing you can throw at the guy.
Nobody's gonna screw with him.
Yeah, I mean, it's Rob Halford.
Run you over with his motorcycle and scream at you.
There you go. He's a metal gods. But screaming for vengeance. That's probably what that's about. I'm all pissed off. But after Stained Class, right near the very end of the same year, 1978, comes the next record, which in the UK was called Killing Machine.
Yeah.
And then in America, it was called Hellbent for Leather. And have you ever read why they?
I think it was a marketing thing. People thought it was like the Killing Machine was like it was too
metal,
too intense for people in the States. But actually, I think this is the cooler title.
Hellbent for Leather.
Yeah. I mean, that's like
especially now it has sort of like these, again, the double entendre kind of effect, But
it also kind of like it kind of solidified, okay, this is like their onstage persona too. Like everybody was decked out in leather and spikes too.
Yep.
So people could either read it like that, or they could read like, hey, this guy looks like he's going to the toolbox to hang out with some bears.
Yeah. I don't know. It's funny. You go back and you look, and it's so obvious that what Robert Halford was talking about in a lot of his songs. But I think just nobody went there. It just wasn't like the obvious place for like you to go as a metalhead to assume that.
Well, and
he was writing songs about this kind of stuff
with Kiss. Why did parents let children listen to Kiss when all they talk about is getting blowjobs and getting laid and hanging out with underage girls and partying? There was never any good songs in there.
No. I mean, the late 70s is an odd era for metal, in a weird way. It was very, very.
Well, in all the hair bands, it was all about excess and sex and whatnot. So
I mean, I can't believe I was allowed to buy Poison and Motley Crue tapes in like 3rd grade. I mean, it's like horrifying to think about some of the lyrics I was singing along to.
Were you paying attention to the lyrics?
I knew what was going on. Yeah, like
I've never been a lyric guy per se. I've always been more of the music, so it's unless it really jumps out, I didn't really pay attention.
I remember like getting like Dr. Feelgood and some of that stuff, and reading like Rattlesnake Shake and like.
At that point, I was like
some of that stuff.
Dr. Feelgood's about the drug dealer or whatever.
Well, and that was fine, but like Rattlesnake Shake or She Goes Down or Sticky Sweet, like you're reading those songs and you're in 4th grade.
That was in high school,
and like 4th and 5th grade, that's like giggle material on the playground. That's like, dude, check this out.
What did you guys say when you hear the zipper of the pants and she goes down?
We knew exactly what was going on. I mean, we had gotten a hold of Playboys and stuff by that time, so like we knew what was going on. We had older brothers, like not my older brothers, but my friend, actually Joe Forrester was his name. He and I kind of stumbled on Dokken and Motley Crue and all that stuff in 2nd and 3rd grade together. So pretty funny. So we knew what was going on, but again with Priest, they kind of veiled everything pretty well, I think.
Yeah.
And plus they wrote enough like fantasy lyrics too that you couldn't like pinpoint what their thematic things they were trying to do.
I don't really care as long as they're putting out good songs.
Sure.
I mean, it's like, Turbo Negro is like the absolute opposite end of the spectrum. With none of the people are actually, homosexual in the band.
But yet they're writing overtly kind of Judas Priest kind of like, song titles and stuff. But yeah, I guess whenever I used to think of Hellbent for Leather, it was never a Priest record that sort of like jumped out to me, and I think it was because of like the song or the title of it. I'd be like, yeah, that's that's probably like a biker record or something. Like I thought maybe it was going to be like a bad Motorhead thing or something, but it's more streamlined, as you point out. Like it's kind of their AC/DC record or something like,
It's not. I don't think it's an immediate record as much.
It's very subtle.
It's subtle, but I mean, it's masterfully done.
And the title track is just, there's an efficiency on this record. Every song's like 2.5, 3 minutes, whereas like Priest has been writing more of these epic 5-6 minute long songs.
There's nothing over the longest song on here is 4 minutes 13.
Yeah, so I mean and you gotta say that it's kind of like their AC/DC record. I mean, really, I hate to kind of go back to that cliche, but they kind of get everything they need in like 3 minutes. And like Hellbent for Leather seems like such a simple tune, and then we're gonna open things up with that. But you get to the solo, and that solo is very like, that's coming out of the first 3-4 Iron Maiden records type solo. I mean, it's got that kind of melodicism. And then we're gonna get to Green Manalishi, the Peter Green Fleetwood Mac cover. But it's Green Manalishi. Was it the man with the two-prong
crown?
With the two-prong crown. And Peter Green, we were reading in one of my Fleetwood Mac CDs as we were kind of researching this. He used to introduce this song at old Fleetwood Mac concerts in the late 60s and 70s by saying like, this is a song about the devil. So totally appropriate material for a heavy metal band to sort of kind of get into.
Well, this is before Stevie Nicks and all that kind of crap with.
Well, yeah, the pop when it was
stuff
originally written, sure. By the time Priest records this, the Stevie Nicks stuff had kind of come and passed with rumors and all that, but. Yeah, so this is the sort of more blues rock, interesting era of Fleetwood Mac, if you will. If you've never checked out that era that this song comes from, I mean,
Play On and
then Play On.
What else was there?
I mean, there's some good things there. Mr. Wonderful, The Pious Bird of Good Omen, any really the live records at that time. The Boston Tea Party live set is good.
Yeah.
That's got a 12-minute version of Green Manalishi, but
when the End of the Game solo CD with Peter Green,
that's pretty experimental.
Pretty
that's
nice.
Some pretty out there stuff. But we're gonna play the version, Priest version from Unleash in the East, because it's got a little bit more punch to it. I think a crunch in the guitars and just the energy. It's a great cover. Odd choice. Kind of like the Joan Baez Diamonds and Rust, but Priest seems to make these odd choices work when they do a cover song.
They seem to find something in it that speaks to their aesthetic, and it never seems like a stretch.
Sure, except for on Ram It Down when they do Johnny Be Good. So
we won't talk about that.
Not a great Priest cover. And then we're gonna end things with Running Wild, which the famous pirate band, I think,
probably spawned the pirate. The German pirate band on the Jolly Roger.
Yeah.
God awful garbage. Jeez.
And pay attention in particular to that opening riff and Running Wild. We'll talk about it, see if you recognize it when we come back. So enjoy some Hellbent for Leather, Green Manalishi, and Running Wild.
Wait, and just taken over. Hear the roar as they sense the fear. Wheels, a glint of steel and a flash of light. Screams from a streak of fire as he strikes. Hellbent for leather. Hellbent for leather. Blackest night, faster than a shadow, comes the flare from a raging sun. An exhibition, ship precision, yet no one knows from where he comes. Fools, self-destruct cannot take the crown. Dreams crash one by one to the ground. Hellbent for leather. Hellbent for leather. There's many who try to prove that they're faster. They died as they tried. darkness cooks. And you come sneaking around, making me do things I don't wanna do. Believe that you need my love so bad. Always creeping around, trying to drive me mad. Busted in all my dreams, making me see things I don't wanna see. You're the green Manalishi with a two-prong crown. All my dragging is up, all your bringing is down. Just taking my love and slip away, leaving me here just trying to keep from following you. Like a madman, my feet don't touch the ground. I move amongst the nightlife, and they just step aside. Cause when they see me come in, they know I'm running wild. General, there's nothing that bothers me at all. I take on all comers, they back up or they fall. Raise their hands to stop me. I laugh and I defy. Cause what's the point in living unless you're living no chains can hold me down. Always break those walls. Society, tell me what to do or say. I taste the life that pleases me. I'll raise a storm for all the world to see. I never stumble, never fall, never step for risk. I rebel, but I walk tall, and I demand respect. I move amongst the nightlife, and then just step aside. Cause when they see me coming, they know I'm running wild. I'm running wild. I'm running wild. Get out of my way. I'm running
Welcome back. That was Running Wild, Green Manalishi, and Hellbent for Leather. And Mark, tell us about Running Wild and what they may have heard there in terms of some familiarity.
What was this? 2000? Was it 2005?
2000.
Was that 2000?
I think so, because it was right after Chemical
Holy
Wedding.
crap. Okay, it was.
Yeah.
2000, Iron Maiden came back with Dickinson, Adrian Smith. You might have heard The Wicker Man.
Yeah, Brave New World.
That's basically the opening riff on Running Wild is 3/4 of that opening riff.
Yeah, yeah. And then you kind of toss in a little bit of, again, the kind of dirty kind of...
There's two chord changes they make that wasn't on this, but it's almost the same tone too.
Yeah.
Which
it's a pretty fantastic tune, And
actually that kind of like dirtier tune is something that Adrian Smith was known for back in the day, so I don't think it's quite as... I mean, I'm sure there might have been some crossover there. I don't think it was a blatant...
But I mean, the two big new wave of British heavy metal bands are Judas Priest and Iron Maiden.
Yeah.
There's going to be some riffs that Megadeth and Metallica write that are similar because they cross those sort of lines in a weird way. And, I think Priest has their own definition of sound and Maiden has their own definition. So I think if they borrowed styles like, say, the bass playing from the Ripper, it was just odiing to each other in a way. But I don't know. I've never really read anything about like competition between those guys. They were kind of the two big headlining metal bands of the early '80s. But
I don't know. I think they're almost like a generation apart.
That's true.
Because even like Halford, he sang...
They started in '69. Priest did like some of the roots of it in bar bands and different things. Yeah, yeah.
No, but I think there's a closer connection with Sabbath. Like I know Halford actually sang with Sabbath a couple times when Ozzy bowed out or something.
Oh, really?
Yeah, which would have been pretty sweet to see or
That'd
hear.
Be an interesting show. Yeah.
And then Maiden didn't really start up until
77, 78, right?
Yeah, I think they might have recorded Soundhouse tapes in '76 or something, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, so the bands are kind of playing off of each other, but so Hellbent for Leather kind of really represents to me the end of an era, kind of the purity, and to me Unleash in the East, which is put out later that year after Hellbent for Leather in late '79. That's kind of really the bookend. It's kind of like closes the door on a Judas Priest era. And of course, the '80s are sort of born. And 1980 is a really weird year for metal. It's kind of considered one of the greatest years ever. I mean, you've got Back in Black from AC/DC and Heaven and Hell from Sabbath. It's kind of like the rebirth of a lot of these older bands that had existed in the '70s. And of course, you get... I wouldn't call it controversial, but I think controversial for metalheads is British Steel from Judas Priest, which kind of unleashes their commerciality upon the world.
It's kind of it's a progression from Hellbent for Leather as far as like condensed songs, stripping it down to the absolute minimal amount of stuff possible.
But yet there's some very conscious 80s metal kind of like songwriting that's there, and no one really knew what 80s metal was going to turn into with the hair band movement and kind of Quiet Riot, Rat, Motley Crue kind of sound, but it's there in certain places. And you hear a song like Living After Midnight, and it's a great hard rock song, but it's very consciously commercial. And I mean, I guess on some level there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, it's great. People got to eat, bands that have been doing it for 10 years, they kind of want to make some money at a certain point.
This is the era that Priest was selling out stadiums and arenas. So.
Yeah, and this sets up the arena sound for Judas Priest in a way. It's well produced, it's well played, but again, the sound is kind of dumbed down a bit. Les Binks leaves on drums, and they bring in Dave Holland, and Dave Holland is really just sort of
meat and potatoes.
Yeah, I mean, he's got nothing special, no flair. I mean, even like Alan Moore, who drummed on Sad Wings of Destiny, has a little bit of like odd choices that he's making with drums.
Give him style.
Give him a little bit of style. And I just don't hear it on Dave Holland. I hear just kind of like real plodding, kind of just average drumming, Lars Ulrich type stuff, nothing real special. But, obviously British Steel with Living After Midnight and Breaking the Law, those two songs in particular, I think kind of unleash a new audience to Judas Priest, an audience that really probably hadn't accessed them before.
Yeah. Great cover, though.
Yeah, I mean, it's an iconic cover, holding the razor blade with the Priest logo on it. And, I don't know. I mean, what are your feelings on British Steel? Like, kind of going back and digging into it before this show.
It's one I very rarely go back and listen to. Mm-hmm. The stuff is so. The tracks seem to just be so overplayed. Like, nobody ever needs to hear Breaking the Law again.
Yeah,
I don't ever need to hear it again.
If I need to hear it, I'll just close my eyes and imagine it in a movie or commercial or something, you know.
But yeah, with we're playing Rapid Fire
and the Rage,
which still I think has a little bit more of that punch that the earlier Priest stuff had as well. But
Rapid Fire is really, to me, a great template for the Priest's kind of heavier 80s style, where they're doing like rip roaring, kind of fast, you know, propulsive metal tunes. It's not over the top like you'll hear later with the Painkiller stuff, you know, per se, or even some of the stuff like, you know, Jawbreaker or whatever. But it's there, like the roots of it are there, and it's a great way to open a record up. And I think it's something I was kind of thinking about the other day is Judas Priest for some reason knows how to open a record. If you think of their album openers, you're talking Victim of Change, Sinner, Exciter, you know, this tune, Rapid Fire. You've got the Hellion, Electric Eye. You've got Painkiller, Ram It Down. Jawbreaker, I think, opens up Defenders of Faith. Oh no, Free Will Burn.
Free Will Burn, which,
you know, so I mean,
decent song, yeah.
You know, blazing songs. You know, I mean, they really, you know how to like kick everything into action.
Yeah.
It's just what happens after that.
It's always the slump in the middle usually of their records.
Yeah, the second half kind of the records a lot of times is what kind of bogs them down. But you know, on British Steel, you had, you know, Metal Gods, which was like almost like conceived to be like clapped along in a stadium, or United, which was like a metal anthem. But it's like it's sort of like if you're a metalhead, you're kind of in on it. Like you kind of like, to me, I feel slighted when I listen to it. I feel like joke's on me, you know, like there's a Spinal Tap-ish element to it, you know, in a way, like they're really consciously building for stadium rock. And
it makes me think of like Manowar.
Yeah.
Which, you know, if you like Manowar, fine, but
good for you, I guess. Yeah, it's not my cup of tea. You know, and I don't know, and you know, there's some really interesting elements to it. I know VH1 Classic does classic albums where they show like how a whole album was produced, and they do one for British Steel, and there's some neat things like on Metal Gods at the end of that song, they're playing a bunch of silverware from the studio with like spoons and forks, and they're like hitting them together, and that's where it gets that.
Is this one where they got an actual pretty huge budget?
Yeah, they recorded, I think, Ringo Starr's studio. You know, so like they're doing, you know, impressive stuff, and so everything's really perfect on this record. I mean, everything's really well formed, and the melodies on like Living After Midnight are really like catchy, and it's all there. But to me, there's like that dynamicness of
it's a little sterile.
Of the 70s is gone. That warmth, that kind of oops, we made a mistake, but it kind of gives it some personality.
Yeah.
You know, the Sad Wings, Sin After Sin, Stained Class kind of sound. And the efficiency is gone a little bit from Hellbent for Leather. You know, it's not as like punchy. It's trying to be consciously like.
It almost goes back to that to that their old recording style, you know, from the first couple records, but there's no punch anymore.
Exactly. You know, so I don't know. I mean, I know there's a lot of British Steel fans out there, but I would say actually I was surprised in researching Judas Priest how many diehard Priest fans don't like this record. Yeah, to me it's like the Black record, the Black album.
This is probably the record that if anybody had just your run of the mill music enthusiast, might probably find this, and you know, Back in Black and the Black album, you know, those more accessible records.
But true metal fans, I don't think are big British Steel fans, if that makes sense.
No,
like if you're a hardcore metalhead, you know, you don't pull British Steel out very often. You're going to pull out Unleashed in the East or Stained Glass or something like that, you know, or Painkiller, something like that. So it's kind of a different record in that regard. So what we tried to do with the 80s stuff is we tried to consciously say, let's not play the stuff that's dominated kind of, you know, classic rock, you know, the Living After Midnight and Got Another Thing Coming.
Breaking the Law. Yeah,
try to avoid the cliches a little bit. So the two that we picked out was Rapid Fire, which we already talked about, and then The Rage, which we're going to hear in a second. And I think what's interesting about The Rage is it's one of the only songs that uses Ian Hill's bass playing, and he's sort of gone away in a way. They kind of buried him in all this production and just kind of pushed Halford's vocals up and the two guitars, and that's sort of like everything. You know?
he's
And
just
so-
filling in a little bit of the sonic void, but you don't hear it anymore.
Yeah, so he gets an opportunity to sort of, kick it in a little bit. And the riff that he comes in with is kind of a quintessential 80s hair metal riff in a way. It's kind of sleazy a little bit. It's kind of cool. So enjoy Rapid Fire and The Rage from British Steel.
Pounding the world like a battering ram. Forging the furnace for the final grand slam. Chopping away at the saw, soon the cause will be done.
We're back. That was The Rage in Rapid Fire. And
Do you want to scream for vengeance?
I do want to scream a little bit for vengeance. I guess we should say that we're now at the point where we're skipping our first record.
Yeah.
So, Point of Entry, you know, I may call it a personal bias. It's not a very well-liked record by Judas Priest fans. You may be a Heading Out to the Highway fan, but we've sort of stuck by our guns and saying we're not going to play these songs that fit on classic rock radio.
Well, and this is for the most part, an extreme metal podcast. So we want to try to cater, our view of Priest through that kind of aesthetic.
Exactly. That's a good point to make too. And there's nothing extreme about Point of Entry. It's
boredom.
It's to me, it's the ultimate heavy metal parking lot soundtrack. Like when I see scenes of like kind of and I want to pick my words wisely.
Yeah.
Some of the degenerate.
That's really careful choosing.
Well, I was going to use a different term, but it has that persona to it, that kind of Trans Am, drinking cheap beer, just bad 70s hair, bad t-shirts, tight jeans.
Yeah. Everything
that's cliche about the early 80s hard rock, Foreigner, Bad Company kind of scene, to me, is encapsulated in Point of Entry.
Yeah.
That's like the soundtrack to like, hey man, I got a bitchin' Trans Am, It's like,
you got a bag of weed, man. Let's go hang out by the lake.
What happens when the Matthew McConaughey character from Dazed and Confused makes it to the 80s? Well, he's probably listening to Point of Entry, smoking a lot of dope, and probably in and out of like prison, on some level. And Point of Entry is like that record, Heading Out to the Highway. I don't know. So we're skipping that, and so we're going to close things out tonight, and we'll talk just briefly about this because in part 3 we'll come back to Screaming for Vengeance again. But Screaming for Vengeance is probably alongside British Steel, their most well-known record, and we're going to launch into the title track. And came out in 1982, and definitely amped up the production.
Yeah.
It's a lot louder. It's just a loud record.
There's more energy. I mean, it seems like they kind of were done with their experimental, minimalist phase or whatever, and then decide to, let's go back to what we're known for and see if we can still pull this out.
Sure. And it's great cover, I mean,
yeah, it's pretty sweet. Big robot bird thing.
Yeah, and the yellow and red. I mean, it's one of those covers that catches your eyes because of the color use. You don't see too many metal covers with a lot of yellow on them or something like that.
Yeah, I've got the LP version of it. It's a fantastic thing just to throw up on the wall.
Yeah. So, anyways, it's a cool record, and we'll talk a little bit more about it when we come back. But this is the title track. And to me, the scream that he comes out with in the beginning of Screaming for Vengeance is sort of like proof that the Priest is back, and they're kind of like, okay, let's rock again.
Balls have dropped and we're back.
Exactly. So, but let us know what you thought of part 2. Hopefully, you're not the world's largest Point of Entry fan, and you're gonna send us hate mail or something. Hopefully,
if you are, then you've got the record and you can listen to it anytime you want.
Yeah, exactly. Or tell us what song we should have played off Point of Entry, because I struggled.
I don't own it, so
I looked at. There's one tune called like Soul or something that was like borderline, like we could have maybe played it, but we don't need to.
Yeah.
But yes, shoot us an email at requiempodcast@gmail.com, or check out the website, which is
requiempodcast.com. And if you would be so kind, if you enjoy these records, check out our Amazon affiliate links off in the right sidebar. Anything you buy, we get a little kickback that helps our operating costs and whatnot.
Absolutely.
And it'd also be fantastic if you could go over to iTunes and drop us a review.
Mm-hmm. We love getting reviews. We love getting emails and comments and things like that. And so do let us know what you thought of part 2. And we'll be back in a couple weeks with the concluding Judas Priest show. So stay tuned to that here in a couple weeks. So enjoy Screaming for Vengeance. I'm Jason.
And I'm Mark.